Hello, friend. Welcome to Science for Sleep. Whether you are returning tonight or discovering this quiet channel for the first time, this is a gentle place to slow down, learn something soft and interesting, and let the day slowly fall behind you. Tonight, we are going to begin with a strange and simple thought. You are sitting here right now because a long chain of people came before you. Not just a few people, not just the names you know, not just parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. Behind every person alive today, there is a hidden crowd. Some of them lived in cities. Some lived in villages. Some lived on farms, near rivers, beside forests, in mountain valleys, or along cold coastlines where the sea decided the rhythm of each day. Some spoke languages you may not understand. Some used names that have been changed, shortened, translated, or forgotten. Some lived in houses made of wood, stone, clay, brick, or packed earth. Some never traveled more than a few miles from the place where they were born. Others crossed borders, oceans, deserts, or mountain passes without knowing that one choice would help lead to you. In genealogy, a direct ancestor means someone you descend from directly. Your parents are direct ancestors. So are your grandparents. So are your great-grandparents. A cousin, an aunt, or an uncle is family, but they are not usually a direct ancestor. A direct ancestor is part of the line that had to continue for you to exist. That makes ancestry different from a simple list of relatives. It is more like a chain. One life connects to another life. One birth leads to another birth. One family continues into the next. And eventually, after many generations, that chain arrives here, in the present moment. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, you're welcome to subscribe. And if it feels comfortable, you can leave a comment sharing where you're listening from tonight. It helps others find their way to this calm corner of the world, one sleepy traveler at a time. For now, you can let the pace slow again and return to the long, quiet story behind you. Because most of the people in that story are not people you could ever name. You may know the name of a grandparent. Maybe you know the name of a great-grandparent. Some families can go back farther with old photographs, birth records, church books, family Bibles, immigration papers, or stories passed down at kitchen tables. But very quickly, the line becomes dim. A face becomes a name becomes a blank space. A blank space becomes a person who still had a full life, even if almost nothing about that life survived. They woke up in the morning. They worked. They ate. They worried. They grew tired. They got sick. They cared for children. They lost people. They made choices. And most of them had no idea that hundreds of years later, someone would be able to wonder about them. A person living in the year 1700 did not know that one small part of their story might keep moving forward for more than 3 centuries. Someone born in 1500 lived before electric lights, before modern medicine, before trains, before photography, before telephones, and before anyone could take a DNA test from a small tube of saliva. Yet people from that far back may still sit somewhere in your family line. And if we keep going farther, beyond surnames, beyond paper records, beyond the countries we recognize today, the crowd becomes even larger. There are farmers who planted grain by hand. There are mothers who carried water. There are sailors who watched coastlines fade behind them. There are children who survived winters, fevers, hunger, and dangerous births. There are people who lived through events that now appear in history books, and people whose lives were never written down at all. All of them are hidden behind a single living person, not as a perfect story, not as a clean line, but as a long chain of survival, movement, chance, and time. And once you begin to count that chain, even in the simplest way, something surprising happens. The number of people behind one person grows much faster than the mind expects. Starting with the closest part of the chain, 2 parents. Each parent had 2 parents of their own. That gives you 4 grandparents. Each grandparent also had 2 parents. That gives you 8 great-grandparents. One more generation gives you 16 great-great-grandparents. At first, the pattern feels simple. It is the kind of math that can fit inside a few quiet seconds. 2 becomes 4. 4 becomes 8. 8 becomes 16. Then the pattern begins to move faster than the imagination can comfortably follow. By 5 generations back, there are 32 ancestral slots. By 6 generations back, there are 64. By 7 generations back, there are 128. These are called ancestral slots because they are places on a family tree. Each slot points to someone who had to be there in the chain. For the moment, the counting is only showing the shape of the tree on paper. After 10 generations, the number reaches 1,024 ancestral slots. 10 generations may sound ancient, though in human terms, it is often only a few hundred years. If a generation is around 25 to 30 years, then 10 generations can take you back roughly 250 to 300 years. That could place many family lines somewhere around the 1700s. A person living then may have worked by candlelight, cooked over a fire, traveled by foot, horse, cart, or sailing ship, and lived before vaccines were widely used. Yet on paper, by that distance alone, one person today already has more than 1,000 spaces behind them. The count keeps rising. By 20 generations back, the number is 1,048,576 ancestral slots. That is more than the population of many modern cities. 20 generations can reach back roughly 500 to 600 years, depending on the average age at which parents had children. That can carry a family line toward the time before printed books became common in Europe, before most ordinary people left many records, and before many present-day nations had their modern borders. The paper tree has already become too large to picture as individual faces. At 30 generations back, the number passes 1 billion ancestral slots. 1 billion is a difficult number to hold in the mind. If you counted one number every second without stopping, counting to 1 billion would take more than 31 years. 1 billion grains of rice would weigh many tons. 1 billion people would fill a vast modern country. Yet 30 generations is often less than 1,000 years. That means the family tree, if it doubled cleanly every time, would claim an almost impossible number of people behind a single life. The math becomes even stranger because human history has limits. The world did not always contain billions of people. Around the year 1000, the total human population was far smaller than it is today. Many estimates place it at only a few 100 million people across the entire planet. Most ancestors also lived within connected regions, communities, and travel routes. A farming village in 1300 did not have access to every person on Earth. A mountain valley, island, forest settlement, or small town had a much smaller circle of possible families. People usually met partners through nearby work, nearby worship, nearby markets, family arrangements, seasonal fairs, or neighboring villages. This is why the phrase ancestral slots matters. The slots keep doubling on a chart. The actual people behind those slots begin to repeat. The same man or woman from the past may appear in more than one place in the family tree. Two branches that look separate near the present can quietly join together farther back. The numbers still matter because they show how wide the chain wants to grow. They create the shape of the mystery. A single person seems to require thousands, then millions, then more than a billion spaces behind them. Human history gives us a different answer. Those spaces cannot all be unique forever. The tree reaches a hidden limit, and once it reaches that limit, it begins to fold back into itself. The paper count gives every generation twice as many spaces. Human life gives those spaces a smaller world to fit inside. In many places, especially before trains, cars, and modern highways, people usually married someone from a nearby area. A person born in a farming village in the 1500s might grow up within walking distance of the same fields, church, mill, market road, and neighboring families for most of their life. Daily movement was limited by feet, horses, carts, rivers, and weather. A trip of 20 miles could take most of a day. Crossing a mountain pass, sailing to another island, or leaving a valley could be a major event. Because of that, many communities had a limited marriage pool. That means there were only so many families nearby that a person was likely to meet, know, and marry into. Over generations, the same family lines could connect again and again. A third cousin might marry a fourth cousin. Two people might share a great-great-grandparent without knowing it. In a small island community, a remote valley, a rural parish, or a tightly connected religious group, those shared ancestors could appear even more often. This is where the family tree begins to change shape. Genealogists call this pedigree collapse. Pedigree means a person's line of descent. Collapse means that the number of unique people in the tree becomes smaller than the number of spaces on the chart. The chart may show 1,024 ancestral slots 10 generations back. Yet a few of those slots may be filled by the same person appearing more than once. Farther back, that overlap can become much larger. Imagine two branches of a family tree moving backward through time. Near the present, they look separate. One branch goes through one grandparent. The other branch goes through another grandparent. After several more generations, both branches may reach the same married couple who lived in the same county, island, village, or valley centuries earlier. That couple then occupies more than one place in the tree. The person today still descends from them through more than one path. The chart has doubled. The real number of unique ancestors has grown more slowly. This happened often because older communities were smaller and more connected than modern life can make us imagine. Today, a person can move across a country in a few hours by plane. They can meet people online, attend schools far from home, or build a life thousands of miles from where they were born. For most of human history, that was rare. Many people lived close to the place where their parents and grandparents had lived. In medieval villages, church parish records often followed the same surnames for long stretches of time. On islands, the sea could make outside marriage less common. In mountain regions, steep terrain could keep communities separated from the next valley. In rural areas, farm inheritance, seasonal work, and local custom often kept families tied to the same place. Religious communities could also create close marriage networks because shared belief, law, language, or social pressure shaped who people married. None of this means every person married a close relative. Most overlap was distant enough that families may not have noticed it. The important point is quieter and stranger. The same ancestor can occupy more than one slot. That single idea helps solve the impossible math. Your ancestry can still stretch back through hundreds of years. The number of spaces can still double on paper. The human beings behind those spaces begin to repeat as the lines move deeper into the past. A family tree becomes tangled through ordinary life, through geography, through local marriage, through shared communities, through people staying near rivers, fields, roads, churches, ports, and valleys, long enough for separate branches to meet again. The shape starts to feel less like a tree with clean branches reaching forever outward. It feels more like a living web, tied to the places where real people were born, worked, married, and stayed. The lines on a family chart can feel flat. A name sits above another name. A date sits beside a place. A thin mark connects one generation to the generation before it. Real ancestry happened on land. It happened beside rivers that carried boats, fish, trade goods, and news. It happened in valleys where steep hills made travel slow. It happened near coastlines where storms, tides, and ports shaped daily life. It happened on farms where families planted the same fields for decades. For much of human history, geography quietly decided who people were likely to meet. A river could make travel easier. A mountain range could slow it down. An island could keep a community closely connected for generations. A port could bring strangers, sailors, merchants, soldiers, and migrants into the same streets. River valleys were some of the oldest paths of settlement. The Nile Valley in Egypt supported farming communities for thousands of years because the river flooded and left rich soil behind. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers helped support early cities in Mesopotamia, in the region of modern Iraq and Syria. The Yellow River and Yangtze River shaped huge parts of early Chinese settlement. In Europe, rivers like the Rhine and Danube became long corridors for trade, movement, armies, and towns. A family living near a river might have more contact with nearby villages than a family living deep in a mountain valley. Water made movement cheaper than land travel for much of history. A loaded boat could carry grain, timber, cloth, tools, or people more easily than a wagon on a muddy road. Roads mattered too, though many were rough. In wet seasons, dirt paths could turn into mud. In winter, snow could close mountain routes. Before railways became common in the 1800s, many people still moved at the speed of walking animals, sailing winds, and local roads. That shaped marriage. A person often met a husband or wife through the places life already carried them. The local market, the nearby church or meeting house, a harvest field, a workshop, a fishing dock, a mining camp, a border town where two languages could be heard in the same street. Place narrowed the circle of possible families. In a farming village, land tied generations together. A son might work the same soil his father worked. A daughter might marry into a nearby household with fields beside the same road. In fishing towns, families followed the sea. Work depended on boats, nets, tides, and knowledge of dangerous waters close to shore. In mining towns, ancestry could gather around coal, copper, silver, iron, or salt. When a mine opened, workers arrived. When a mine closed, families scattered. Cities created a different kind of web. A city could draw people from farms, villages, and foreign ports. London, Amsterdam, Istanbul, Cairo, Shanghai, and New York all became places where family lines crossed because work and trade pulled people together. A person entering a city might meet someone whose grandparents came from a different region, spoke a different language, or carried a different surname tradition. Border regions were especially complex. A family could live in the same village while maps changed around them. Over centuries, parts of Central Europe, the Balkans, Ireland, Poland, Ukraine, and the Eastern Mediterranean saw borders, rulers, languages, and official records change again and again. One ancestor might be described by a kingdom, another by an empire, another by a modern nation, even if the family had not moved far. This is why ancestry is easier to picture when it is placed on a map. Each family line moved through landscapes with real limits. Rivers opened routes. Mountains slowed contact. Seas separated people and connected ports. Farmland kept households rooted. Cities mixed families faster. Work pulled people toward mills, docks, mines, factories, armies, and markets. For many generations, a family line could remain clustered in one region. Then, a single pressure could change the pattern. A failed harvest, a new job, a war moving across a border, a ship leaving from a crowded harbor. Places shaped the web quietly for centuries, until history pushed families away from the ground they knew. Sometimes the push began quietly. Rain came too late. A crop failed. A landlord raised rent. A river changed course. A mine opened in the next county, and wages there seemed better than staying home. Other times, the push arrived with a date that later appeared in history books. In Ireland, the Great Famine began in 1845, when a water mold called Phytophthora infestans ruined potato crops across the island. Potatoes had become a main food for many poor families because they grew well in small plots of land. When the crop failed again and again, hunger spread through villages and farms. By the early 1850s, roughly 1 million people had died, and more than 1 million had left Ireland. Many crossed the Atlantic by ship. Some went to Canada. Some went to the United States. Some went to Britain, Australia, or other parts of the world. For the families who left, ancestry changed direction at the dock. A child born in County Cork, Galway, or Mayo could grow up in Boston, Toronto, Liverpool, or New York. A surname that had belonged to one landscape for centuries could suddenly begin appearing in another country's census records. Migration often followed pressure. War pushed families out of borderlands and cities. Disease emptied households. Religious persecution made people leave places where their parents had lived for generations. Land shortages sent younger sons and daughters away because the family farm could no longer be divided into smaller pieces. Empires moved soldiers, workers, prisoners, servants, and settlers across huge distances. Climate stress also mattered. A long drought, a colder growing season, a flood, or a failed harvest could make one region harder to survive in, especially before modern food transport. In the 1800s, industrialization changed the map of family life. Factories needed workers, mills needed hands, railways needed builders, engineers, station workers, guards and porters. Coal mines pulled men and boys into towns built around shafts, rail lines, and smoke. Textile cities like Manchester in England grew rapidly because cotton mills, canals, and railways brought work into one place. A person who once might have stayed on a farm could move into a crowded city street, marry someone from a different village, and begin a new branch of the family line. Ports became gateways for ancestry. Liverpool, Hamburg, Rotterdam, Naples, New York, Halifax, Quebec City, Buenos Aires, Cape Town, and Sydney all received or sent people across oceans. A port could hold several worlds at once. There were dock workers loading crates, families carrying trunks, officials checking names, children hearing new languages before the ship even left. Steamships made ocean crossings faster in the 1800s, and railways carried people inland after they arrived. When the first transcontinental railroad in the United States was completed in 1869, travel across the continent became much faster than the old wagon routes. Rail lines also changed settlement in Canada, Russia, India, Argentina, Australia, and many other regions. For some ancestors, movement came through force. The Atlantic slave trade carried millions of African people across the ocean between the 1500s and the 1800s. Families were separated, names were changed, and records were often made by people who treated human beings as property. That history still shapes ancestry research today, because many family lines were broken on paper, even while they continued biologically. Other forced movements came through war, colonization, forced labor, exile, and state policy. A person's descendants may carry traces of a journey that began with no real choice. Borders could also move while families stayed in place. A village in Central Europe might be listed under one empire in one century, another state in the next, and a modern nation later on. In parts of Poland, Ukraine, the Balkans, Ireland, and the Eastern Mediterranean, rulers and borders changed many times. A family could live in the same town, while official records described them with different languages, governments, and national labels. That is why ancestry records can feel confusing. A person may seem to come from several countries, when their family actually stayed close to the same fields, churches, roads, or markets. Movement was shaped by pressure, opportunity, danger, and law. A family line could turn because a port was open. A railway reached a town. A famine emptied a village. A factory offered wages. A border shifted on a map. Yet history only reaches the future through real people making real choices under real conditions. A young man might hear that a mill town needed workers. The town may have been only 12 miles away, but in 1820, 12 miles on foot could mean several hours of walking. He might leave after harvest, carrying clothes, bread, and a few coins. At the mill, he could meet someone from a village he had never visited. A marriage could follow. A child could be born there instead of back home. A whole family line could shift because one person accepted work in another town. This is how large history becomes personal. A factory opens. A road improves. A canal reaches a market. A harvest fails. A family hears that wages are better somewhere else. Then one person chooses or is forced to move. Sometimes the decision was made at a harbor. During the 1800s, many families crossing the Atlantic traveled in steerage, the cheaper lower part of a ship. They carried trunks, sacks, blankets, letters, tools, and sometimes food for the voyage. A sailing ship could take several weeks to cross the ocean. Steamships later made the trip faster, and by the late 1800s, many crossings from Europe to North America took closer to 1 or 2 weeks, depending on the route and weather. A person standing at a dock in Liverpool, Hamburg, Naples, Quebec, Halifax, or New York may have been thinking about work, hunger, family, or safety. They could not see the future family tree that would grow from that boarding pass. A choice could also mean staying. In a village after a bad harvest, some families left. Others remained because an elderly parent needed care. Land could not be sold. Money was short, or the road felt too uncertain. The family that stayed might marry into a nearby household. The family that left might cross a border. 2 branches from the same grandparents could become separate stories within a single generation. Survival itself was often the turning point. Before modern medicine, a winter illness could change a family line. Pneumonia, measles, smallpox, tuberculosis, childbirth fever, infected wounds, and contaminated water could take lives quickly. In many parts of Europe and North America before the late 1800s, it was common for families to lose infants or young children. Clean water systems, vaccines, antibiotics, and safer childbirth care came slowly, place by place. A child who survived a fever at age 2 might grow up, marry, and become the ancestor of hundreds or thousands of people. A child who did not survive might leave no descendants at all. That gives ancestry a quiet fragility. A line can pass through one birth, one recovery, one winter, one decision to call a midwife, one cup of safer water, one neighbor who helped during a hard week. Marriage also changed the path. In earlier centuries, remarriage after a spouse died was common in many communities, especially when children, land, or work had to be managed. A widower with young children might remarry within months or a few years. A widow might marry again for protection, labor, companionship, or survival. That second marriage could become the line that leads forward. A different household could create different children, different cousins, different names, and different records. Even timing mattered. A marriage delayed by 1 year could change which people met. A harvest season could keep someone home. A war could remove young men from a village. A job contract could place someone in a new town during the exact month they met a future spouse. Ancestry is shaped by contingency. Contingency means events could have happened another way. A person may imagine family history as something solid, as if it always had to unfold exactly as it did. The closer we look, the more it seems built from fragile moments. A door opened. A road was taken. A ship left on time. A child recovered. A marriage happened after grief. A family stayed through a difficult season. Most of these choices were made by people trying to get through ordinary life. They did not think of themselves as ancestors. They did not know that their names might appear in a record 200 years later. They did not know that a person far in the future might exist because of a small decision made on a cold morning, in a crowded port, beside a field, or inside a quiet room. Many of the people who carried the line forward lived full lives that barely touched the written record. Their lives may have filled thousands of ordinary days. Still, many of them left only the faintest marks behind. A person could be born, grow up, work for 50 years, raise children, lose family members, grow old, and leave no diary, no portrait, no letter, and no marked grave that survived to the present. For most of human history, being remembered in detail often depended on money, status, land, religion, or contact with government. Kings were recorded. Landowners were recorded. Soldiers were listed in military papers. Taxpayers appeared in ledgers. Church members appeared in baptism, marriage, and burial books. People who owned property, fought in armies, went to court, or paid certain taxes had a better chance of leaving a name behind. Ordinary life was preserved more unevenly. In England, parish registers were ordered in 1538, during the reign of Henry VIII. These books recorded baptisms, marriages, and burials in local churches. For many families, a parish register may be the first place where an ancestor's name appears. The entry might be only one line. A child baptized on a certain day. A couple married in a small village. A burial during winter. Sometimes the handwriting is cramped. Sometimes the ink has faded. Sometimes the page has been torn, stained, or damaged by damp air. A whole life may survive as a date beside a name. Earlier records often focused on land and power. The Domesday Book, created in England in 1086 after the Norman conquest, recorded land, tenants, livestock, mills, ploughs, and property value. It was a massive survey built for rule and taxation. It tells historians a great deal about landholding, wealth, and control. It tells much less about the inner lives of ordinary women, children, servants, and laborers who also lived in those places. That pattern appears again and again. Records were often created because institutions needed them. A church needed to track sacraments. A court needed to settle disputes. An army needed names. A tax collector needed households. A land office needed ownership. A ship needed a passenger list. The daily feelings of a person needing bread, repairing a roof, tending sheep, hauling water, or sitting beside a sick child were rarely the reason a record was made. Low literacy also shaped what survived. In many times and places, especially before widespread public schooling, large numbers of ordinary people could not write long personal records. Some could sign their names. Others marked legal papers with an X. A person may have had a sharp memory, strong skills, and deep knowledge of land, weather, animals, tools, and family history, while leaving no written words of their own. Portraits were also rare for much of history. Before photography became public in 1839, a painted portrait usually required money. A wealthy merchant, noble family, or church leader might preserve a face on canvas. A farm worker, dock laborer, midwife, servant, or poor migrant usually passed through life without a painted image. Even after photography arrived, early photographs still cost money and access. Many people born before the mid-1800s were never photographed at all. Some groups were recorded through the eyes of people with power over them. Enslaved people were often listed in property records, wills, bills of sale, or plantation documents, sometimes without full names or family relationships. Indigenous communities were often misnamed, grouped under outside labels, or recorded only when governments, missionaries, traders, or military officials entered their lives. Migrants might appear with changed spellings. Displaced families could lose documents during war, famine, exile, or forced movement. Women were often recorded through marriage, widowhood, childbirth, or their relationship to men in the household. Children might appear briefly in baptism or burial records, then vanish from the page. This uneven record does something strange to ancestry. The closer ancestors may feel real because a photograph, letter, or family story still reaches them. Farther back, a person may become only a name in old ink. Then even the name may disappear. The chain continued through them, yet the details were often left outside the archive. That silence does not mean the lives were empty. It means the systems that preserved the past captured only certain parts of human life. For a long time, tracing ancestry meant following whatever fragments survived. The search often began at home. A grandmother remembered the name of a village. A father knew that his own father had crossed the ocean as a child. An old aunt kept a box of photographs in a closet, with dates written on the backs in blue ink. A family Bible might list births, marriages, and deaths on a few pages between the Old and New Testaments. A letter from 1912 might mention a brother in another city. A faded wedding photo might show relatives whose names were never written down, but whose faces stayed in the family for a while. This was the first kind of ancestry research. Memory. People asked older relatives what they knew. They wrote down names. They compared stories. They looked for places that came up again and again. A town in Italy, a county in Ireland, a farm in Ontario, a village in Poland, a neighborhood in New York. These clues could lead into written records. A birth record might give a child's name, date of birth, place of birth, and parents. A baptism record might show when a child was brought into a church community. A marriage record could name the couple, their ages, their parents, their witnesses, and sometimes their occupations. A death record might give an age, a cause of death, an address, or the name of a spouse. Each small document could open another door. A marriage record might name a father. That father's name could lead to a census. The census could show a household living on a certain street. That street could connect to a city directory, a land record, or a newspaper notice. A census is an official count of people. Many countries use censuses to track households, ages, jobs, birthplaces, languages, religions, or property. In the United States, a federal census has been taken every 10 years since 1790. In Canada, the first national census after Confederation was taken in 1871. In England and Wales, modern national censuses began in 1801, with more detailed household records appearing from 1841 onward. A census page can feel quiet, but it can hold a whole household in one row. A mother, a father, children listed by age, a grandparent in the same home, a boarder renting a room, a job like carpenter, farmer, seamstress, sailor, miner, teacher, or laborer. Immigration records could add another piece. Passenger lists might show a name, age, occupation, ship, port of departure, port of arrival, and sometimes the name of a relative left behind. A person arriving at Ellis Island after it opened in 1892 might be recorded with a village, a final destination, and the amount of money they carried. Canadian arrivals through Quebec, Halifax, or other ports created their own paper trails. A single line on a ship manifest could place a family between two worlds. Land records could show where a family settled. Tax records could show who owned property or who owed money. Military records might reveal height, age, birthplace, unit, service dates, wounds, pensions, or next of kin. Cemetery records and gravestones could give names, dates, family links, symbols, and religious clues. Newspapers carried birth notices, wedding announcements, obituaries, court reports, business ads, ship arrivals, missing person notices, and local stories. Church records, synagogue records, mosque records, and court records could preserve names when civil governments did not. Genealogy works by linking these pieces carefully. A name alone is rarely enough. Names repeat often. A village might have several men named John Murphy, Maria Rossi, Jan Kowalski, or Anna Schmidt. Proof comes from matching details. A name, a date, a place, a spouse, a child, a job, a witness, an address. A researcher follows the pattern until the pieces support one another. When the records survive, the trail can be beautiful. A person can move from a modern birth certificate to a grandparent's marriage record, then to a great-grandparent's passenger list, then to a baptism written in another language more than a century earlier. The page turns, and a life that seemed gone becomes partly visible again. The method depends on fragile materials. Paper can burn, ink can fade, names can shift. A clerk can write down the wrong age. A family story can carry truth and mistake in the same sentence. Every document gives a clue, and every clue has to be handled gently. The paper trail can lead far into the past, then stop at a missing page, a changed name, or a record that was never made. A family search can stop for very ordinary reasons. The page might be missing. The ink might be pale. The clerk may have heard a name once, guessed the spelling, and moved on to the next person in line. Paper records feel official when they survive, but they were made by human beings. A tired priest, a rushed census taker, a ship officer writing names in a crowded port, a local clerk copying information from someone who could not read the form, a soldier giving his age quickly before joining a regiment. Each record passed through a moment like that. Mistakes entered quietly. A surname could change from one page to the next. A Polish, Italian, German, Irish, Ukrainian, Chinese, Arabic, or Jewish name might be written by someone who did not speak the language well. Letters could be swapped. Endings could be dropped. Sounds could be written the way they seemed to the clerk. A name like Schmidt could become Smith. Johann could become John. Giuseppe could become Joseph. A long surname could be shortened so it was easier to spell, easier to say, or easier to fit into a new country. Sometimes families chose the change themselves. A migrant might adjust a name for work, safety, school, or comfort. A child might use a different version than a parent. A marriage could change a surname. A remarriage could place children under a stepfather's name in one record, while an earlier record used their birth name. Dates could drift too. Before modern birth certificates became common, many people did not know their exact birth date. An age in a census might be rounded. A person listed as 38 in one record might be 42 10 years later. Some people made themselves younger for marriage, work, military service, or migration. Others grew older on paper because someone else guessed. A birth year can move by 2 years, 5 years, even 10 years across different documents. Handwriting created another layer of confusion. Old records were often written in cursive, with ink that spread into rough paper. Some letters looked almost the same. An S could look like an F. A U could look like an N. A clerk's quick writing could turn one surname into several possible readings. When records were later copied, indexed, or typed into databases, a hard-to-read word could become a new mistake. Physical records could disappear completely. Fires destroyed courthouses, churches, town halls, and archives. Wars damaged records through bombing, burning, looting, and rushed evacuation. Floods, mold, insects, damp cellars, and poor storage ruined paper slowly. In Ireland, a major fire at the Public Record Office in Dublin in 1922 destroyed a huge number of historical records, including many wills, court documents, and church-related materials. For some families, that single event created gaps that can never be fully repaired. Official records could also reflect the bias of the people making them. Enslaved people were often recorded without full names, birth dates, or family relationships. Indigenous people were sometimes placed under outside names or broad labels that did not match their own communities. Poor families might appear only when they owed taxes, entered a workhouse, stood before a court, or received church aid. Women could be listed under a husband's name, with their own birth name missing. Children who died young might appear only once in a burial book. Some family events were kept private or hidden. Adoption could be informal. A child might be raised by grandparents, aunts, neighbors, or a step-parent without a clear legal record. Parentage could be misstated because of shame, safety, inheritance, or local custom. A person born outside marriage might be listed with missing or false details. A family fleeing danger might use a different name on purpose. Borders added another kind of puzzle. A town could stay in the same place while its official country changed. Records might move from Latin to German, from Russian to Polish, from Ottoman Turkish to Greek, from one empire's forms to another nation's forms. The family remained near the same road, church, river, or market square, while the paper trail changed language around them. Documentary ancestry works best when many records overlap and support each other. A name matches an address. An age fits a marriage. A birthplace agrees with a census. A witness appears again in a baptism. Yet even careful research can reach a locked door. A missing book. A changed name. A fire. A secret. A record that was never created. That silence shaped family history for centuries, until a new kind of evidence began to appear inside the body itself. Inside nearly every cell of the body is a long chemical record. It is called DNA. DNA is short for deoxyribonucleic acid. The name sounds complicated, though the idea can be held gently. DNA is the molecule that carries instructions for how living things grow, repair themselves, and pass traits from one generation to the next. Hair color, eye color, blood type, some disease risks, and many small body details are influenced by this code. The full set of DNA instructions in a living thing is called a genome. A human genome contains about 3 billion DNA letters. Those letters are written with 4 chemical building blocks, usually called A, C, G, and T. They do not form words like a book. They form patterns that cells can use. For a long time, people knew that children often looked like their parents, grandparents, or older relatives. A child might have a father's chin, a grandmother's eyes, or a family pattern of height, hair texture, or freckles. Farmers and animal breeders noticed inheritance long before anyone could see DNA. They could breed horses, cattle, dogs, wheat, corn, or roses for certain traits. The pattern was visible. The hidden mechanism was still unknown. In the 1800s, an Austrian monk named Gregor Mendel studied pea plants in a monastery garden. He crossed plants with traits like purple flowers, white flowers, tall stems, short stems, smooth seeds, and wrinkled seeds. His work showed that traits could pass through families in regular patterns. Mendel published his pea plant studies in 1866, though his work became widely recognized only decades later. He did not know about DNA. He was seeing the shadow of inheritance before science could read the molecule behind it. The major turn came in the 1950s. In 1953, James Watson and Francis Crick proposed the double helix structure of DNA. A double helix looks like a twisted ladder. Rosalind Franklin's X-ray images of DNA helped reveal that shape, including the famous image known as Photo 51. Maurice Wilkins also worked on X-ray studies of DNA. That structure explained how DNA could carry information and copy itself. The two strands could separate. Each strand could help build a matching new strand. This gave life a way to pass instructions forward with remarkable accuracy, while still allowing small changes over time. Those small changes matter for ancestry. As generations pass, tiny differences build up in families and populations. Some differences are recent. Others are very old. Some are shared by close relatives. Others are shared by people whose ancestors lived in the same broad region long ago. By the late 1900s, scientists had learned how to read more and more of this code. DNA sequencing is the process of finding the order of the DNA letters. At first, sequencing was slow and expensive. Reading a small stretch of DNA took careful lab work. Then, machines became faster. Computers became stronger. Scientists began to imagine reading the entire human genome. The Human Genome Project launched in October 1990. It was one of the largest biology projects ever attempted. Thousands of researchers from several countries worked on it. The goal was to produce the first full reference sequence of human DNA. In April 2003, the project was declared complete. That achievement gave science a new kind of map. It did not show roads, cities, or borders. It showed the order of human genetic instructions. Once that map existed, researchers could compare DNA from different people more carefully. They could look for shared markers. A marker is a place in DNA where people often vary. If two people share many markers, especially in long matching stretches, they may be related more closely. If many people from a region share certain patterns, those patterns can help estimate ancestry. This changed family history. Paper records still mattered. Names, dates, places, and relationships still mattered. Now there was another layer of evidence. A person's cells carried inherited clues from parents, grandparents, and older lines. Some clues could confirm a known family story. Others could reveal a relative no one expected. The body had become a biological archive. Modern ancestry testing grew from this scientific foundation, though the process is more careful and more limited than it may first appear. An ancestry test does not open the past like a finished book. It begins by comparing patterns. A modern ancestry test often begins in a very ordinary way. Someone spits into a small plastic tube or rubs a soft swab along the inside of the cheek. Inside that sample are cells from the mouth. Inside many of those cells is DNA. The tube is sealed, mailed to a lab, scanned into a tracking system, and prepared for testing. In the lab, technicians break open the cells and separate the DNA from the rest of the material. The DNA is then placed onto a testing chip, sometimes called a genotyping array. This chip is designed to check many specific places across the genome. A genome is the full set of genetic instructions in a person. The test usually does not read every single one of the roughly 3 billion DNA letters. Many consumer ancestry tests look at hundreds of thousands of selected markers. Those markers are chosen because they are useful for comparing one person's DNA with another person's DNA. One important kind of marker is called a SNP. SNP stands for single nucleotide polymorphism. That long phrase means a common single letter difference in DNA. At one position in the genome, many people might have the letter A. Other people might have the letter G in that same place. That tiny difference can become useful when scientists compare thousands or hundreds of thousands of these positions at once. A single SNP usually says very little. A large pattern of SNPs can say much more. The test looks across autosomal DNA. Autosomal DNA comes from chromosomes numbered 1 through 22. These chromosomes are inherited from both sides of the family. They carry mixed pieces from parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and many older ancestors. Because of that, autosomal DNA is useful for finding relatives and estimating broad ancestral regions. After the lab reads the markers, the company compares the person's pattern with reference databases. A reference database is a collection of DNA samples from people whose family backgrounds are linked to certain regions or populations. For example, a database might include people whose grandparents were born in the same area, or whose family history is strongly tied to a region for several generations. The company looks for patterns. If a person's DNA shares many markers with people in one reference group, the report may estimate that part of their ancestry connects to that region. If other parts of their DNA resemble a different reference group, the report may divide the estimate into more than one area. This is where ancestry percentages come from. A report might suggest that someone has ancestry connected to Ireland, West Africa, Scandinavia, the Balkans, Indigenous America, East Asia, or another broad region. The exact regions depend on the company's database and how detailed its comparison groups are. These results are estimates based on current data. They predict likely ancestral connections. They do not show a perfect map of every ancestor's life. A percentage cannot name the village where every person lived. It cannot tell whether one ancestor was a farmer, sailor, weaver, midwife, soldier, or shopkeeper. It cannot fully explain language, culture, religion, adoption, migration, or family stories. Still, the test can reveal real clues. It can show that two living people share long stretches of DNA. It can suggest cousin relationships. It can support a paper trail. It can point toward ancestral regions that were lost through migration, changed names, broken records, or silence. The power comes from comparison. One person's DNA is placed beside the DNA of many other people. Shared patterns become clues. Large databases make some clues clearer. New samples can change the picture over time. This is why ancestry results sometimes update. The person's DNA has not changed. The comparison set has grown. The map has become more detailed. That makes modern ancestry testing both powerful and careful. It can open doors that paper records could not open alone. It can also remind us that DNA carries only certain kinds of information. Even inside the genome, the past does not travel along one single road. Different parts of DNA preserve different paths backward. One part of your DNA gives a broad view of recent family history. Another part follows one narrow maternal path. A different part can follow one narrow paternal path. Together, these paths help explain why ancestry testing can feel so layered. The most common type of ancestry test looks at autosomal DNA. Autosomal DNA comes from chromosomes 1 through 22. Humans usually have 23 pairs of chromosomes in each cell. Chromosomes are long packages of DNA. The first 22 pairs are called autosomes. They carry mixed inheritance from both sides of the family. That means autosomal DNA includes pieces from your mother's side and your father's side. It also includes pieces from grandparents, great-grandparents, and many older lines. This is the type of DNA most often used for ethnicity estimates and cousin matches. It is helpful because it covers a wide part of the family tree. A close cousin may share long stretches of autosomal DNA with you. A more distant cousin may share shorter stretches. Over generations, those shared pieces become smaller because the DNA is reshuffled before it is passed on. Autosomal testing works well for recent ancestry because it gathers signals from many branches at once. Then there is mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondria are tiny structures inside cells that help turn food into usable energy. They have their own small circle of DNA, separate from the DNA stored in the cell nucleus. Mitochondrial DNA contains 37 genes. A gene is a section of DNA that helps the body make a useful product, often a protein or a working molecule. Mitochondrial DNA follows a special path through the family. It is passed through egg cells. That means a person usually receives mitochondrial DNA from their mother. Their mother received it from her mother. That grandmother received it from her mother, and so on. This creates a direct maternal line. It can be tested in anyone, because people inherit mitochondria from the egg cell that formed them. The path is narrow, though. It does not describe every woman in the family tree. It follows one direct line from child to mother, then to that mother's mother, and farther back in the same direction. A person may have hundreds of female ancestors across the wider family tree, while mitochondrial DNA follows only one of those lines. This makes it useful for certain questions. It can help study deep maternal ancestry. It can connect people who share the same maternal line. It can also be used in ancient DNA studies, because mitochondrial DNA appears in many copies inside cells, which sometimes makes it easier to recover from old remains than nuclear DNA. Then there is Y-DNA. Y-DNA comes from the Y chromosome. People with a Y chromosome usually inherit it from their biological father. That father inherited it from his father, and the path continues backward through a direct paternal line. This makes Y-DNA useful for tracing one father-to-son line across generations. In many cultures, surnames were also passed from father to child. Because of that, Y-DNA has sometimes been used in surname projects, where people with the same or similar last names compare paternal line DNA. The match can suggest whether two lines may share a male ancestor. The result still needs careful checking with records, dates, and geography. A shared surname alone can be misleading. A changed name, adoption, remarriage, informal parentage, or a break in the paper trail can shift the story. Each genetic road answers a different kind of question. Autosomal DNA gives a wide, mixed view of many recent branches. Mitochondrial DNA follows the direct maternal line. Y-DNA follows the direct paternal line in people who have a Y chromosome. The three paths can overlap in meaning, yet they carry different signals from the past. That is why two ancestry reports can feel different depending on what kind of DNA was tested. One result may speak broadly about regions. Another may point to one ancient maternal line. Another may follow one paternal path through time. DNA ancestry becomes less like a single doorway and more like a house with several quiet rooms. Each room holds clues. Each clue has limits. After the test turns those clues into regions and percentages, the numbers can look clean on the screen. The story behind those numbers is much more careful. A report might say that part of your ancestry connects to one region. Another part may connect to a neighboring region. The screen may show clean percentages with colored maps and neat labels. 28% here, 17% there, 6% somewhere else. Those numbers can feel very exact. They are best understood as careful estimates. An ancestry company creates those estimates by comparing your DNA with reference groups. A reference group is made from people whose family backgrounds are connected to a certain place or population. For example, a company may have a group of people whose recent ancestors lived in Western Ireland. Another group may include people with deep family roots in southern Italy. Another may include people connected to the Yoruba, Han Chinese, Finnish, Ashkenazi Jewish, indigenous Mexican, or Balkan populations. The company looks at many DNA markers across your genome. Then it asks which reference groups your markers most closely resemble. That comparison becomes the ancestry estimate. The strength of the result depends on the quality of the reference database. A reference database is like the comparison library behind the test. If a library has many well-documented samples from one region, the test may recognize that region more clearly. If the library has fewer samples from another region, the result may be broader. Some parts of the world have been sampled more heavily than others. Europe has many large reference groups in commercial databases because many early customers came from Europe and North America. Some indigenous, African, Asian, Pacific Islander, and Middle Eastern populations may be represented less evenly, depending on the company and region. That affects the detail of the map. One company may be able to separate Ireland from Scotland more clearly. Another may group nearby areas together. One test may label a segment as broadly West African. Another may connect it to a more specific region if its database has stronger comparison samples there. The DNA in the person did not change. The comparison system changed. This is also why two siblings can receive different ancestry estimates. Full siblings usually inherit about half of their DNA from each parent, but they do not inherit the same half. One sibling may receive more DNA markers that match one grandparent's region. Another sibling may receive more markers from a different branch. The family tree is the same, while the inherited pieces are uneven. Companies can also give different results because they use different algorithms. An algorithm is a set of instructions a computer follows to solve a problem. In ancestry testing, the algorithm decides how to divide DNA into segments, compare those segments, and assign them to reference groups. Each company builds its own system. Each company has its own database. Each company chooses how specific or broad the regions should be. That means a person might take tests from two companies and see labels that do not match perfectly. One report may say Germanic Europe. Another may say Central Europe. A third may split the same ancestry into smaller pieces. Human migration makes the problem harder. People have moved for thousands of years. Neighboring populations often share long histories of trade, marriage, war, religion, and empire. A person from northern France may share some genetic patterns with people from Belgium, Western Germany, or southern England. A person with ancestry from the Balkans may connect to several overlapping histories because the region has long sat between empires, languages, trade routes, and migrations. The borders on today's map are recent, compared with the age of human ancestry. A DNA segment does not know the name of a modern country. It only carries inherited patterns. Those patterns form through many generations of people living near each other, moving away, and mixing back in. As companies collect more samples, they often update results. A report from 5 years ago may look different today. The person's saliva sample has the same DNA. The database has grown larger. The map has become more detailed. A broad region may be split into smaller regions. A small percentage may disappear. A new label may appear because the company has improved its reference groups. This makes ancestry percentages useful but careful. They can point toward real family patterns. They can support records. They can reveal hidden connections. They can suggest where parts of a family story may have passed through. The percentages work best when they are treated as clues with ranges and uncertainty. They are part of the story a person carries. The older records, the spoken family memories, the places on a map, the names that changed, and the people who raised one another also matter. The numbers on the screen begin to make more sense when we look at how each person receives DNA in the first place. Before DNA reaches a child, it is shuffled. A child receives about half of their autosomal DNA from each biological parent. That sounds simple at first. 1/2 comes through the egg. 1/2 comes through the sperm. Together, they form a new person, with a new mix of inherited pieces. Inside that simple picture, a much more delicate process has already happened. Before egg cells and sperm cells form, the body goes through a special kind of cell division called meiosis. Meiosis is the process that creates reproductive cells. Most cells in the body carry 2 copies of each chromosome. One copy came from a person's mother. The other copy came from their father. Egg cells and sperm cells need only 1 copy of each chromosome, so that when they join, the new child has the usual full set again. During meiosis, matching chromosome pairs line up beside each other. These matching pairs are called homologous chromosomes. Homologous means they carry the same kinds of genes in the same general order, though the details may differ. One chromosome may carry a DNA pattern from a grandmother. The matching chromosome may carry a pattern from a grandfather. While they are lined up, the chromosomes can exchange pieces. This exchange is called homologous recombination. It is one of the main reasons siblings can inherit different pieces of the same family past. Picture 2 long threads lying beside each other. One thread carries pieces from one side of a family. The other thread carries pieces from another side. During recombination, small stretches trade places. The result is a new thread that carries parts of both. The real process happens at the molecular level, inside cells, with DNA strands breaking and rejoining in controlled ways. It is quiet, precise, and incredibly important. By the time an egg cell or sperm cell is finished, each chromosome has become a fresh mix of older inheritance. That means a parent does not pass on their DNA exactly as they received it. They pass on a reshuffled version. This is why siblings are genetically different, unless they are identical twins. Two brothers may have the same parents and the same grandparents, while carrying different pieces from those grandparents. One sibling might inherit a longer stretch of DNA from a maternal grandfather. Another might inherit a stronger signal from a paternal grandmother. Both belong to the same family tree. Their DNA samples tell slightly different versions of it. This helps explain why ancestry percentages can differ between siblings. One sibling's test may show more of one region. A second sibling may show more of another. The family history did not change. The inherited pieces were shuffled differently before each child was born. Recombination also affects cousin matching. Close relatives share longer stretches of DNA because there has been less time for recombination to break those stretches apart. Distant relatives share smaller pieces, and sometimes the shared pieces become too small to detect with confidence. A parent and child share about half their autosomal DNA. Full siblings usually share about half on average, though the exact pattern varies. First cousins often share about 1/8 on average because they have the same grandparents on one side. As the relationship becomes more distant, the amount of shared DNA usually becomes smaller and less predictable. This is why DNA is such a powerful clue, while still being incomplete. It carries real inheritance from the past. It also carries only the pieces that happen to survive the shuffle. A family tree may contain hundreds of ancestors from a certain time period. A genome holds selected fragments from that larger tree. Some fragments are long enough to trace. Some are tiny. Some have been broken apart so many times that they blend into the deeper background of human history. Every person's DNA is a living mixture shaped by meiosis, recombination, and chance. The past enters the present through a careful biological shuffle. Each generation receives part of what came before, then passes on another reshuffled part to the generation after it. Over enough time, that shuffle creates a strange possibility. A real ancestor can remain in the family tree while leaving no clear piece of DNA behind. That possibility changes the way DNA ancestry has to be understood. A family tree can hold someone whose DNA no longer appears clearly in one living descendant. The person still belongs to the tree. Their life still sits in the chain. Their place in the family line remains real. Genealogists often separate two ideas that sound similar at first. A genealogical ancestor is someone you descend from on the family tree. A genetic ancestor is someone from whom you inherited detectable DNA. Detectable means that a clear enough stretch of DNA remains for a test, a researcher, or a matching system to recognize it. Those two ideas overlap strongly for close relatives. Your parents are both genealogical and genetic ancestors. Your grandparents usually are too. A grandparent gives about 1/4 of your autosomal DNA on average. A great-grandparent gives about 1/8 on average. A great-great-grandparent gives about 1/16. the numbers keep shrinking as the generations move backward. By 10 generations back, a single ancestral slot represents about 1 part in 1024 on paper. That is less than 0.1% of your autosomal DNA, on average, from one specific slot. Recombination makes the real amount uneven. One ancestor from that distance may leave a small trace. Another may leave a stronger trace. A third may leave no identifiable autosomal DNA in you at all. The family connection still exists through births, marriages, and descent. The genetic signal may have faded through chance. This happens because DNA does not pass down in perfect slices. A parent gives a child half of their autosomal DNA. That half is a shuffled mix of the parent's own ancestors. The other half stays behind. When the child later has children, another half is passed on. Across many generations, some pieces survive. Other pieces drop out of a particular line. A fragment from a woman who lived in 1700 might pass to one child. A different child may receive none of that exact fragment. One branch of her descendants may carry it for several generations. Another branch may lose it quickly. Both branches can still descend from her. Only one branch may carry a detectable piece of her DNA. This is why a DNA test can never hold the whole family tree. Autosomal DNA is powerful for recent ancestry because it carries a wide mix from many branches. Over time, the pieces become smaller and harder to assign to one named person. A tiny fragment may still be real, yet too small to connect with confidence. Testing companies usually avoid making claims from very tiny pieces because small matches can happen by coincidence or by older shared population history. The farther back the ancestor lived, the more the signal blends into the background. A person who lived in the 1600s may have thousands of living descendants today. Some descendants may carry identifiable DNA from that person. Others may carry no clear trace. A family tree built from records may still show the descent. The genome may hold a different sample of the same past. This can feel strange because ancestry often feels like something that should be complete inside the body. The body carries a real archive. The archive has gaps. A name in a church register, a land deed, a ship list, or a census may point to someone who shaped the family line even when DNA cannot highlight them. The same thing can happen with regions. A person may have a documented ancestor from a certain place, while a test report shows little or no percentage from that region. The DNA connected to that ancestor may have been diluted, reshuffled, or placed into tiny fragments over time. A sibling or cousin might show the signal more clearly because they inherited a different mix. This makes ancestry feel less like one perfect record and more like several overlapping kinds of evidence. Paper records follow lines of descent. DNA follows inherited pieces. Family stories preserve memory. Each one can show part of the path. Together, they create a fuller picture than any single method can give. The missing genetic trace does not make an ancestor less real. It shows how delicate inheritance is. A person can matter completely in the chain of life while leaving no clear marker in one descendant's test. Some pieces vanish from your own genome. Other pieces may still be resting quietly in the DNA of a cousin. A relative's DNA can sometimes hold a piece of the family past that your own test missed. This is why cousin matches are so useful in modern genealogy. A cousin is connected to you through a shared ancestor. First cousins usually share grandparents. Second cousins usually share great-grandparents. Third cousins usually share great-great-grandparents. The farther away the relationship becomes, the smaller and less predictable the shared DNA usually gets. Still, even a small shared piece can become a clue when it is placed beside names, dates, and places. DNA testing companies look for stretches of DNA that two people have in common. These stretches are called shared segments. A segment is simply a continuous piece of DNA along a chromosome. When two people share a long segment, it may mean they both inherited that piece from the same ancestor. The closer the shared ancestor, the longer the shared segments tend to be. A parent and child share very large amounts of DNA. Full siblings usually share about half of their autosomal DNA on average. First cousins often share about 1/8 on average. More distant cousins may share only small pieces, and sometimes they share no detectable DNA at all. To measure these shared pieces, genetic genealogy often uses a unit called a centimorgan. The word comes from Thomas Hunt Morgan, a geneticist who studied inheritance in the early 1900s. A centimorgan measures how often recombination separates 2 points on a chromosome. 1 centimorgan means there is about a 1% chance that 2 markers will be separated by recombination during the formation of an egg or sperm cell. In the human genome, 1 centimorgan often corresponds to roughly 1 million base pairs on average. A base pair is one rung of the DNA ladder. The exact distance can vary depending on the chromosome region, because recombination does not happen at the same rate everywhere. This measurement helps estimate relationships. A match of several thousand centimorgans points to a very close relationship. A match of a few hundred centimorgans may point toward a first or second cousin range, depending on the pattern. A small match of 20 or 30 centimorgans could represent a more distant connection. Those small matches need more careful checking. The number gives a clue. The family tree gives the clue a place to land. This is where genetic genealogy becomes detective work. Suppose several people share the same DNA segment with each other. Their family trees may include different surnames, different towns, and different branches. A researcher can compare those trees and look for a couple, family, or location that appears in more than one line. That method is often called triangulation. Triangulation means using multiple related clues to point toward the same source. In DNA research, it often means using several matches who share the same segment or the same family line to identify a likely common ancestor. The process can be slow. One match may have a detailed tree. A second match may list only grandparents. A third match may have no tree at all. The researcher looks for repeated names, nearby villages, shared migration routes, cemetery records, marriage witnesses, and census households. A shared DNA segment might point to a family in rural Quebec, a county in Ireland, a Jewish community in Eastern Europe, an island in the Caribbean, or a farming region in the American South. Paper records and DNA records begin to work together. A census can show a household, A baptism record can name parents. A marriage record can reveal a mother's maiden name. A cousin match can suggest which branch deserves a closer look. This can help with adoption cases, unknown parentage, changed surnames, broken records, and family lines separated by migration. It can also reconnect branches that have been apart for more than a century. Two living people may have never met. Their grandparents may have lived in different countries. Their shared DNA can still point back to one earlier household, one village, or one couple whose children moved in different directions. The family web becomes visible through living fragments. A missing piece in one person can remain in another. A forgotten branch can become clearer when several descendants carry overlapping clues. That same logic, comparing DNA across time and distance, reaches even deeper when scientists turn from living cousins to ancient bones and teeth. Ancient DNA begins with remains that look quiet and still. A tooth, a finger bone, a small piece of skull, a dense bone near the inner ear. To an archaeologist, these remains can show age, height, injury, diet, disease, and burial practice. To a geneticist, they may also hold broken pieces of an old genome. Recovering those pieces is difficult. After death, DNA begins to fall apart. Heat, water, oxygen, bacteria, sunlight, and time all damage it. Long strands break into short fragments. Chemical changes appear in the letters. Soil microbes leave their own genetic material behind. A bone lying in a warm, wet environment may lose usable DNA much faster than a bone preserved in a cold cave, dry ground, or frozen soil. Teeth can be especially useful because the hard outer enamel helps protect the material inside. Bones can help too, especially dense parts of the skeleton. One of the most valuable areas is the petrous bone, a hard bone near the inner ear. It can preserve DNA better than many other parts of the body because it is so dense. The work has to be careful from the very beginning. Modern human DNA can easily contaminate an ancient sample. A tiny flake of skin from a researcher, a breath in the wrong place, or contact from someone who handled the bone decades ago can mix modern DNA with ancient DNA. That creates a serious problem, because the ancient sample may already contain only tiny amounts of usable human DNA. Labs that study ancient DNA often use clean rooms. Researchers wear full protective suits, masks, gloves, hair covers, and face shields. Surfaces are cleaned. Tools are sterilized. Some labs use ultraviolet light to damage stray DNA on equipment. Scientists also run control samples, which are checks that help reveal whether contamination entered during the process. The goal is to separate the real ancient signal from the modern noise around it. This careful work changed the study of human ancestry. In 2010, researchers at the Max Planck Institute helped produce a draft genome of a Neanderthal. Neanderthals were close human relatives who lived in Europe and parts of Western and Central Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. They disappeared around 40,000 years ago, though parts of their DNA still remain in many people alive today. A draft genome means scientists had enough DNA to begin comparing Neanderthals with modern humans, even though the sequence was still incomplete in places. Later, researchers produced a much higher quality Neanderthal genome from a toe bone found in Denisova Cave in southern Siberia. The bone was roughly 50,000 years old. For that genome, each position was read about 50 times on average. That kind of repeated reading matters because ancient DNA is damaged and fragmented. Reading the same position many times helps researchers check the result and reduce mistakes. Denisova Cave also gave science one of the most surprising ancestry discoveries of the modern era. A small finger bone from the cave held DNA from a group now called Denisovans. At first, there was no complete skeleton showing clearly what Denisovans looked like. Their identity came through genetic evidence. DNA revealed that they were a distinct group of ancient humans related to Neanderthals, but with their own separate history. That was a major shift. Bones alone had limits. DNA could show relationships that shape and size could not fully reveal. A small fragment from a cave could connect to people who lived tens of thousands of years ago. It could also connect to people alive now. Ancient DNA let scientists compare the genomes of living people with the genomes of people who died before farming, before writing, before cities, and before modern nations existed. The method reaches beyond surnames, borders, family stories, and paper records. It studies ancestry through inherited patterns that survived in bone, tooth, and living bloodlines. Once those ancient patterns became readable, they began to show something larger than individual family trees. Modern populations were shaped by older migrations moving across continents over thousands of years. Long before a family name was written in a parish book, people were already moving across the earth. Modern ancestry labels often sound fixed. Irish, Nigerian, Japanese, Italian, Mexican, Greek, Norwegian. These names can carry real family meaning, culture, language, food, music, memory, and place. Yet the human story beneath them is much older than today's borders. Many modern nations are only a few hundred years old in their current form. Many surnames became common much later than the first migrations that shaped human populations. The deeper record reaches back through thousands of years of movement. At the widest scale, all living humans belong to the species Homo sapiens. Our species evolved in Africa. Over time, groups of modern humans moved beyond Africa into the Middle East, Europe, Asia, Australia, the Pacific, and the Americas. Many researchers place major movements out of Africa roughly 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, though the full story was spread across many waves, routes, and time periods. Those early migrations happened long before farms, cities, written records, passports, or national maps. People followed coastlines, rivers, grasslands, animal herds, seasons, and safer routes through changing climates. During the Ice Age, climate shaped movement strongly. The last glacial maximum, the coldest part of the last Ice Age, happened roughly 26,500 to 19,000 years ago. Huge ice sheets covered large parts of northern Europe, northern Asia, and North America. Sea levels were much lower because so much water was locked in ice. Some people survived in refuges. A refuge is a place where people, animals, or plants can survive during harsh conditions. In Europe, warmer southern regions, such as the Iberian Peninsula, Italy, and the Balkans became important refuges during colder periods. As the ice retreated, people moved again into northern lands. Ancient DNA helps trace these movements by comparing genetic patterns from old remains with patterns in later people. This method can show population change even when no written record exists. A major study of ancient Europe used genome-wide data from 69 people who lived between 8,000 and 3,000 years ago. The researchers examined nearly 400,000 genetic markers to study how populations change through migration. That kind of work helped show that Europe's ancestry was shaped by several large layers over time. Earlier hunter-gatherer groups lived across the continent after the Ice Age. Then farming populations spread into Europe from older agricultural regions of Anatolia and the Near East, beginning around 9,000 years ago. They brought crops, animals, pottery, and settled village life. Wheat, barley, sheep, goats, cattle, and new farming tools changed where people lived and how many people the land could support. Later, around 5,000 years ago, people connected to the Pontic-Caspian steppe moved westward into parts of Europe. The steppe is a wide grassland region north of the Black Sea and Caspian Sea. These movements are often linked with groups such as the Yamnaya. They used wagons, kept herds, and lived in a world of open grasslands and long-distance movement. Ancient DNA suggests that steppe ancestry became a major part of many later European populations. Similar deep movements happened around the world. In East Asia, rice farming spread from ancient agricultural centers into nearby regions. In Africa, Bantu-speaking groups expanded across large parts of Central, Eastern, and Southern Africa over thousands of years, carrying languages, farming, ironworking, and new settlement patterns. In the Pacific, Austronesian-speaking voyagers began moving from the region of Taiwan and island Southeast Asia thousands of years ago, eventually reaching places as far apart as Hawaii, New Zealand, Easter Island, and Madagascar. Island settlement required boats, navigation, food plants, animals, and knowledge of winds and currents. In the Americas, the first peoples arrived long before European records, with roots connected to ancient populations that moved from northeastern Asia into the Americas during the late Ice Age. All of this sits beneath modern identity. A person's recent family may come from one village, one island, one county, or one city neighborhood. Farther back, that family line may connect to older migrations, layered through time. Farming expansions, Ice Age survival zones, steppe movements, ocean crossings, ancient trade routes. The labels on a modern ancestry report are useful clues, though the deeper story is older and more restless than the labels can show. As ancient DNA fills in more of the map, one idea becomes harder to avoid. Human ancestry has always been shaped by movement, contact, and mixture. Movement leaves contact behind. When people arrive in a new valley, port, island, kingdom, or city, they meet the people already there. Trade can bring families together across language lines. Conquest can move soldiers, captives, servants, and settlers into new places. Migration can place one household beside another that would never have met before. Slavery and forced labor can tear families apart, then create descendants whose records are painful, broken, or hidden. Adoption, remarriage, informal parentage, and intermarriage can carry a family line in directions that paper records may never explain clearly. Across centuries, human groups have mixed, separated, merged, and renamed themselves many times. A community can change its language while many of the people remain in place. A border can move across a village. A conquered region can take on new laws, new names, and new official records. A family can become part of a new nation without walking away from the same road, the same fields, or the same cemetery. Culture often changes faster than DNA. The Roman Empire connected Britain, North Africa, the Balkans, Egypt, Spain, Gaul, the Eastern Mediterranean, and the Near East through roads, armies, trade, slavery, citizenship, and administration. People moved through that system for work, war, service, punishment, marriage, and survival. Centuries later, the labels people used for themselves had changed many times. The inherited mixture from those movements did not disappear just because the political map changed. The same pattern appears along old trade routes. The Silk Roads connected parts of China, Central Asia, Persia, the Middle East, and Europe through goods, animals, ideas, diseases, religions, and travelers. Along the Swahili coast of East Africa, African, Arab, Persian, Indian, and later European influences met through Indian Ocean trade. Ports became places where ancestry could gather quietly across generations. Ships carried ivory, cloth, spices, gold, ceramics, grain, and people. They also carried languages, marriages, beliefs, and family lines. Deep ancestry shows an even older kind of mixture. Modern humans were not the only human relatives on Earth. Neanderthals lived in Europe and parts of Western and Central Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. Denisovans are known mainly through DNA from remains found in Denisova Cave in southern Siberia. When modern humans moved into regions where these older human groups lived, some groups interbred. That means they had children together, and some of those children had descendants who continued into the present. High-quality Neanderthal genetic data has estimated that many present-day people outside Africa carry about 1.5 to 2.1% Neanderthal-derived DNA. The amount varies from person to person and region to region. Denisovan ancestry appears strongly in some populations in Oceania. One major estimate found about 4 to 6% Denisovan genetic contribution in present-day Melanesians. Melanesia includes island regions in the Southwest Pacific, such as Papua New Guinea and nearby islands. These numbers are small, yet they carry a large meaning. Some of the ancestry in living people reaches back to encounters between different kinds of ancient humans tens of thousands of years ago. Those encounters happened before farming, before writing, before cities, before surnames, and before any country on a modern map existed. Recent ancestry has its own layers of mixture. The Caribbean was shaped by indigenous peoples, European colonization, the forced movement of enslaved Africans, indentured labor from India and other regions, and later migration. Latin America carries many different combinations of indigenous American, European, African, and Asian ancestry, with each country and region shaped by its own history. South Asia holds deep layers of migration, language shift, caste history, trade, empire, and local endogamy. Endogamy means people often married within a specific community for many generations. Even that can create both separation and overlap, because the same ancestors may appear repeatedly within the group. Ancestry labels can still matter. They can hold real memory, real belonging, and real connection to place. A family may carry a language, a religion, a recipe, a surname, a song, or a village name for generations. Those things deserve care. The science simply shows that human identity sits on top of older movement and older mixture. DNA can reveal some of those layers. Records can reveal others. Family memory can preserve details that no test can produce. A mature view of ancestry makes room for all of it. The genetic evidence, the historical record, the cultural inheritance, and the lived family story all belong to the larger picture. Even after reading ancient DNA and tracing migrations across continents, there are parts of ancestry that no lab result can measure. A lab can compare markers, estimate regions, and match living relatives. That gives ancestry a powerful biological layer. Still, a person's family story is carried through more than DNA. A child can inherit a language before they ever understand where it came from. The sound of a grandmother's accent, the words used at the dinner table, the prayer spoken before a holiday meal, the nickname passed from one generation to another. These things can move through a family without appearing in a chromosome. A DNA test can show that a person shares genetic markers with people from a region. It cannot measure what a household remembered. It cannot show which songs were sung to children, which foods were cooked in winter, which stories were repeated during long evenings, or which customs survived after a family crossed an ocean. A recipe can carry ancestry in a quiet way. A flatbread, soup, dumpling, stew, tea, spice mix, holiday cake, or preserved vegetable may hold traces of older landscapes. Wheat fields, rice terraces, fishing towns, mountain pastures, olive groves. A family may not know the names of the ancestors who first made the food, yet the habit can still reach the present through hands, kitchens, and memory. Names also carry history, though even names are complicated. A surname may seem like a straight line into the past. In many cultures, surnames often followed a father-to-child line. That can make them useful in genealogy. The connection can shift through adoption, remarriage, informal parentage, name changes, migration, translation, or personal choice. A child might grow up with a stepfather's surname. A family might shorten a name after arriving in a new country. A woman's birth name might disappear from several records after marriage. A person might use one name at home and another name at school or work. The name still matters. Its path can carry legal history, cultural pressure, family decisions, and survival. Adoption shows another part of ancestry that DNA alone cannot hold. An adopted child may grow up inside a family's stories, holidays, recipes, jokes, values, grief, and care. Those experiences shape identity in real time. A step-parent can teach skills, preserve traditions, raise children, and become part of the family memory. A chosen family can become the place where a person is protected, known, and loved. These relationships may not appear in a genetic match list. They can still become part of the lived inheritance that shapes a person's life. Culture can also preserve trauma. A family may carry silence after war, displacement, famine, forced migration, residential schools, slavery, persecution, or poverty. Sometimes children inherit the shape of an old pain without being told the full story. A missing language, a fear of official papers, a habit of saving food, a reluctance to talk about a country left behind, a carefulness around money, strangers, borders, or authority. Some of this can be studied through history, psychology, and family memory. A DNA percentage cannot explain the whole experience. Belonging works in the same quiet way. A person may feel connected to a place because generations lived there. Someone else may feel connected because they were raised there, welcomed there, or taught to love it. A family line can be biological. A family life can also be built through care, daily presence, and shared memory. Genetic ancestry tests compare inherited DNA patterns. They do not account for every social relationship or cultural experience that shapes identity. They cannot measure who stayed up with a sick child, who taught someone to read, who passed down a song, who kept a photograph safe, or who made a home after leaving another one behind. This does not weaken the science. It gives the science its proper place. DNA can reveal hidden relatives, ancient migrations, and biological connections that paper records may never show. Records can give names, dates, homes, and occupations. Memory can preserve tone, feeling, habit, and meaning. Together, these layers make ancestry more human. After all the testing, mapping, comparing, and measuring, the people behind a family line become more than genetic sources. They become workers, parents, travelers, neighbors, caregivers, and children who lived inside real days. Understanding that makes the forgotten ordinary people more important, because their lives carried far more than DNA forward. Those lives become easier to see when they are placed back into real work. A farmer waking before sunrise to check a field of barley. A fisher watching the color of the sky before taking a small boat out from shore. A sailor sleeping in a crowded wooden ship with salt dried into his clothes. A servant carrying water, lighting fires, washing linen, and moving quietly through another family's house. A miner walking underground with a lamp, where coal dust or metal dust could settle into the lungs over years. A midwife arriving at night, carrying knowledge learned from older women, herbs, cloth, warm water, and steady hands. A craftsperson shaping leather, iron, wool, clay, timber, or glass into something another household needed. These were the kinds of lives that carried ancestry forward. Many ancestors never signed a treaty, ruled a kingdom, or had their portrait painted. Their importance sits in quieter facts. Food had to be grown. Children had to be kept warm. Tools had to be repaired. Animals had to be fed. Water had to be carried from wells, rivers, pumps, or village fountains. Clothes had to be washed by hand before electric washing machines existed. Bread had to be baked. Fires had to be managed. sick people, had to be watched through the night. The future often depended on work that left almost no record. In a census, a person might be listed with one word beside their name: laborer, farmer, washerwoman, blacksmith, seamstress, carpenter, merchant, teacher, soldier. Those words can look small on a page. Each one points to thousands of hours of lived time. A blacksmith might know how to heat iron until it glowed orange, then shape it into horseshoes, nails, hinges, knives, or wagon parts. A seamstress might sew by candlelight, measuring cloth carefully because fabric was expensive. A teacher in a one-room schoolhouse might teach children of several ages from the same stove-heated room. A merchant might keep accounts in ink, measure grain, wrap cloth, or sell tools to families who lived miles apart. Domestic labor shaped family lines too. Cooking, cleaning, sewing, nursing, childcare, and elder care often fell to women and girls, though records rarely describe the full weight of it. A mother might give birth at home with no pain relief, no antibiotics, and no modern emergency care. Before the 20th century, childbirth was far more dangerous in many parts of the world than it is in places with modern medicine. Infants also faced serious risks. In many pre-modern societies, a large share of children died before age 5. A single child surviving measles, smallpox, contaminated water, winter fever, or a difficult birth could become the ancestor through whom an entire line continued. Survival was one of the great hidden forces in Ancestry. A family might bury 3 children and raise 2. A widowed parent might remarry, so the household could keep going. A refugee might carry a child across a border. A factory worker might send wages home every week. A sailor might return from one voyage and miss another ship that later disappeared. A merchant might move goods between towns and accidentally carry a family line into a new place. Trade, migration, caregiving, and food production were all ancestry-shaping forces. They determined where people lived, who they met, how children survived, and which households had enough support to continue. The ordinary details mattered because descent passes through bodies that need shelter, food, care, work, and time. An ancestor could be historically unknown and genealogically essential. Their name might be missing from a record. Their face might be gone. Their village might have changed countries. Their language might have faded from the family. Their life still became part of the structure that reaches the present. A person today may carry no clear story about them. The chains still pass through their hands, through a meal prepared, through a field harvested, through a child protected, through a journey survived, through a household kept alive during one more difficult season. All the science, records, migrations, and hidden care eventually moved toward the same quiet point. A single living person, standing at the edge of everything that came before. All of those earlier lives gather quietly behind the present. The known names and the missing names. The people in records, and the people who passed through history with almost no trace. At the beginning, ancestry seemed like a simple chain. 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents. Then the numbers rose faster than the mind could hold. 10 generations created 1,024 ancestral slots. 20 generations created more than 1 million. 30 generations passed 1 billion on paper. That count revealed the first strange truth. A family tree cannot keep spreading outward forever, with every slot filled by a different person. The same ancestor can appear in more than one place. That is pedigree collapse, where branches overlap and the number of unique people becomes smaller than the chart suggests. The tree begins to bend inward. The past becomes a web. That web was shaped by real places. Rivers carried boats, grain, timber, and families. Mountain valleys slowed movement. Islands kept communities closely connected. Ports brought sailors, merchants, migrants, and strangers into the same streets. Farms, fishing towns, mining camps, border regions, and cities all shaped who people met and who they married. History moved through those places. A famine could empty a village. A railway could pull workers inland. A war could scatter families across borders. A ship leaving Liverpool, Hamburg, Naples, Halifax, or New York could carry a surname into a new country. Some people moved for work. Others moved through force, fear, hunger, law, or survival. Paper records tried to capture pieces of this movement. A birth certificate might give a date. A baptism book might give a parish. A census might show a whole household on one street. A passenger list might place a family between one continent and another. Those records can open the past, though they can also close suddenly. Fires, war damage, misspelled names, changed borders, hidden parentage, poor handwriting, and missing archives can break the trail. Then DNA added another kind of evidence. A modern ancestry test may begin with saliva or a cheek swab. The lab reads many genetic markers, including SNPs, which are single-letter differences in DNA. The company compares those markers with reference databases and estimates likely ancestral regions. The result can be useful, yet careful. The percentages depend on the database, the comparison groups, and the way the company reads the patterns. Inside the body, inheritance is also uneven. During meiosis, when egg and sperm cells form, chromosomes exchange pieces through recombination. That shuffle means siblings can inherit different parts of the same family past. A real ancestor can sit in the family tree while leaving no clear DNA segment in one living descendant. Another cousin may carry the piece that one person missed. Shared DNA segments, measured in centimorgans, can help connect living relatives back to common ancestors. Several cousin matches can point toward one branch, one household, or one village where the lines meet again. Ancient DNA carried the same idea deeper. Scientists learned to recover broken genetic fragments from bones and teeth. A Neanderthal toe bone from Denisova Cave, roughly 50,000 years old, helped produce a high-quality genome. A small finger bone from the same cave revealed Denisovans through DNA, before their full story was visible in fossils. Suddenly, ancestry reached beyond family records and into prehistoric humanity. Modern identity rests on older movement. Out of Africa migrations, Ice Age refuges, farming expansions, steppe movements, island voyages, trade routes, conquest, adoption, slavery, migration, and intermarriage all shape the human family. The deeper record shows contact and mixture again and again. Still, DNA holds only one layer. It cannot measure the language spoken at home, the food cooked on holidays, the name someone chose to keep, the child someone raised, or the care that held a family together. Ancestry is biological, cultural, historical, and emotional at the same time. It lives in genes, records, places, habits, memories, silences, and questions. So the image returns to one person in the present, facing the hidden crowd behind them. Some faces are clear, most are dim. The chain reaches through farms, ships, villages, cities, bones, documents, and cells. Every living person stands at this edge. The past has not vanished completely. It has arrived here, breathing quietly in the present.